You lived 30 years without knowing you were autistic. Not undiagnosed, invisible. You didn't miss the signs. The world missed you. Every room I entered, every conversation I forced myself into, it felt like everyone else had a script, and I was just guessing my lines. People called me a lot of things. Weird. Cold. Too intense. Too sensitive. Too much. And somehow still not enough. But no one ever asked, how much effort are you putting in just to seem okay? You've probably felt it too. You enter a room and instantly scan for safety. Corners, exits, eye contact. You try to smile, but it doesn't always land right. You want connection, deeply, but the noise, the lights, the pressure to be normal makes your skin crawl. And then they label you. Distant, awkward, rude. But the truth is, you're tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of decoding. Tired of trying to exist in a world that was never designed for how your brain works. By the end of this video, you'll stop blaming yourself for being too different and start understanding how your mind is wired for depth, not dysfunction. Let's start with the most painful truth. They don't hate you. They just don't understand your language. And when the world doesn't understand you, it turns your silence into suspicion, your quiet into defiance, your overwhelm into weakness. You grew up surrounded by people who worshipped eye contact, who believed volume meant confidence, who taught you that empathy had to look a certain way. They said, speak up, stop fidgeting. Why can't you just smile? You're too serious. You're overthinking everything. But they never asked what you needed. They didn't see that you were already speaking, just not in their language. They didn't realize that I'm fine was your armor, that blinking too much was you holding back tears, that your silence was survival. So they assumed the worst. They assumed you didn't care, that you weren't trying, that you were difficult. But you weren't difficult. You were decoding. You were reading a room with 10 times more input than they could even detect. You were processing tone, rhythm, hidden meaning, danger. You weren't slow, you were precise. And that precision, it came with a cost. The mask is not makeup. It's armor. You crafted it in childhood. You adjusted it through adolescence. You polished it in adulthood. You learned how to smile at the right time, laugh when others laughed, ask, how are you, even when you couldn't handle the answer. And when people praised you for doing better, they were really praising your disappearance. Because what they didn't see was the migraine after the dinner party, the tears in the car after a normal day at work, the emotional shutdown that hit you like a wall the moment you got home. You were blending in, but bleeding out. And maybe no one noticed, because pain doesn't always scream. Sometimes it folds the laundry, goes to the office, text back, I'm good. You weren't thriving. You were camouflaging. And camouflage is not comfort. It's exhaustion. And sometimes it's physical. Your jaw is tense from holding it all in. Your shoulders ache from hours of pretending you're fine. Your stomach knots every time your phone rings. You wake up tired. You crash without warning. This isn't laziness. This is autistic burnout. Chronic, silent, invisible. Let's talk about childhood. How many times did they punish you for being you? You asked too many questions. You corrected adults when something didn't make sense. You played alone and were called antisocial. You cried over the sound of the vacuum and got labeled dramatic. You didn't like hugs, and that was rude. You needed routine, and they called you controlling. And worst of all, they said, You're just too sensitive. But sensitivity isn't weakness. It's data. You were collecting everything. You aren't fragile. You are honest. But in a world that punishes honesty unless it's convenient, you learn to hide. You stopped asking, stopped correcting, stopped crying, stopped being. You became quiet, not by nature, but by necessity. The damage of being misread. When the world misunderstands you long enough, you start to misunderstand yourself. You begin to think, I'm not lovable. I make things harder. I always ruin the mood. I'm exhausting. I'm wrong. And you carry that into adulthood. So when relationships fail, you think it's your fault. When jobs feel unbearable, you think you're just weak. When you need time alone, you think you're selfish. You hear, you're so hard to connect with. You're always in your head. You take things too seriously. You don't let anyone in. But they don't realize you've let everyone in your whole life. That's why you're overwhelmed. That's why you retreat. It's not a wall. It's a wound. Late diagnosis isn't just relief. It's grief. You start to look back and realize all those years you thought you were broken, you were just misunderstood. You were adapting over and over without a name for it. And when the diagnosis comes, it hits like a storm. Relief, yes, because finally there's language for what you felt your entire life, but also grief. Grief for the child who was punished for being overwhelmed. Grief for the teen who thought they were just too much. Grief for the adult who thought they were lazy when really they were drowning in sensory overload. It's okay to grieve. It's necessary. Because healing doesn't begin with positivity. It begins with truth. The plot twist. When you finally unmask, some people will leave because they fell in love with the version of you that kept them comfortable. Not the one that needed boundaries, not the one that said no, not the one that stimmed when stressed or needed scripts to navigate conflict. And yes, it will hurt. It will feel like rejection. It might even feel like failure, but it's not. It's clarity. The ones who leave were never with you. They were with the idea of you. And letting them go? That's not loneliness. That's freedom. Let's destroy a myth. Autistic people lack empathy. No, you don't lack empathy. You feel so much it's overwhelming. You cry at injustice others ignore. You feel the sadness in someone's voice before they admit it. You internalize others' pain to the point where you forget your own. But because you don't always respond with expected facial expressions, because your emotional timing might lag or surge, people assume you feel less, when really, you feel everything. That's not brokenness. That's depth. So, what now? You build a life that makes sense to your nervous system. You stop chasing normal. You start chasing peace. You schedule breaks before you crash. You choose small groups over loud crowds. You stim freely. You wear the noise-canceling headphones. You ask for clarity. You take your time. You write things down. You let people earn access to your unmasking, not demand it. You don't over-explain your needs. You don't apologize for your difference. You don't justify your rhythm. And if someone walks away, let them. Because you're no longer filtering your worth through someone else's misunderstanding. They don't hate you. They never truly saw you. But now, you do. And you don't need the world to understand you. You just need the courage to stop hiding from yourself.